Hello everyone, this is Six Path Weeb. Today, we're exploring an intriguing scenario, Naruko with a tanto, what then? On the surface, it might seem like a simple question about a character with a weapon. But if we dig a little deeper, it opens up a discussion about skill, strategy, and the implications of giving a character new tools in their arsenal. How does it change their combat style, their decision making, or even the dynamics of the story itself? That's what we're here to unpack. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is intended purely for discussion and entertainment purposes. I do not own any of the anime footage used, and all rights and credits go to the original creators and copyright holders. So, let's break it down carefully, analyze the possibilities, and see where this scenario could take us. Sighing, the girl walked along the hall, knowing that she didn't need to worry about any onbu at the moment. Having spent many hours in this tower, Naruko was confident she could navigate it even in her sleep. She might have been surprised if she hadn't memorized the guard shift changes by now. It took some of the excitement out of finding the Hokage's personal library, though, especially since she had spent countless nights there before being assigned her apartment. But it had been a while, so perhaps the building layout had changed. Doors in the same place. Same lock. Yes, it is. Mizuki-sensei said it'd be impossible to break in. Was he exaggerating? She muttered, expertly picking the lock. Years of practice made it easy for her to multitask. She could grumble and focus without difficulty. After all, the Hokage hadn't given a key to the library to a child, but granting Naruko permission to visit at certain times had certainly kept her from getting into trouble. 2 taps here, 5 taps there, and a final gentle adjustment. Click. The lock disengaged, and Naruko stepped inside, leaving the door open. She knew that, as the onbu rotated through their shifts, rather leisurely, judging by the sounds of distant chatter, the Hokage wouldn't return to the tower until the next morning. Still, a small nagging feeling lingered in her mind. Naruko? What are you doing here so late at night? Everything all right at home? The familiar voice made her jump, her orange jumpsuit and sandals fluttering slightly as she spun around. Turning to the old man, she forced a cheerful grin, one that usually softened the stern Hokage. I just missed this place. Nothing beats the smell of books and scrolls, right? Her tone was bright, though whether it was entirely genuine was anyone's guess. Tilting his head thoughtfully, Sarutobi Hiruzen raised an eyebrow. Really? Then why did I hear something about breaking in while you were picking the lock? Naruko hesitated for a brief moment, enough to betray her forced grin. Hiruzen noticed immediately. Oh, that? I just wanted to test a technique. With a quick hand seal and a puff of smoke, she transformed, her blonde hair and cheerful attire shifting into an elegant version of herself. Wow, I suppose that makes my job easier, she remarked with a small shrug, setting her focus on the library's largest scroll, which Mizuki-sensei had called the Forbidden Scroll of Sealing. It was easy to find, nestled among oversized posters in a bin that looked more like a discount section than a repository of secret knowledge. Glancing over the rolled-up illustrations, she made a mental note to return to them later for practice, not for mischief, but to refine her techniques. Landing near a small, secluded clearing, Naruko glanced around to ensure she wasn't being followed. The open space provided a clear view of the surrounding forest, giving her peace of mind. She carefully unrolled the massive scroll. This thing is huge. If it's all just one sheet, I'll need more than my usual stamina to get through it, she muttered. As she scanned the scroll, she discovered new variations of her existing techniques, along with entirely unfamiliar ones. She noted down promising methods, ignoring anything overly complicated for the moment. Her focus remained sharp, her curiosity fueled by the incredible knowledge at her fingertips. Suddenly, a voice rang out behind her. Naruko. What are you doing? She startled, turning quickly to see Iruka-sensei standing nearby, concerned. Naruko froze, realizing she had accidentally focused on a particularly tricky technique that might have been unsafe to attempt without guidance. She quickly deactivated her practice attempt, offering an apologetic smile. Iruka's eyes widened in relief as he noticed nothing dangerous had occurred. Nearby, a white-haired girl with a striking black-bladed arm appeared, her presence commanding and protective. Wielder, you should return inside. It's not safe to linger here, she said gently, helping Naruko gather the scrolls. Thank you, Naruko said, still catching her breath. She glanced at Iruka. Mizuki. He tried to trick me into doing something I shouldn't. I realized it in time. Hiruzen, having arrived quietly, surveyed the scene. He nodded at the protective girl, still curious. And you are? He asked, voice calm but commanding. The girl straightened, her expression composed. I am here to ensure that nothing harms this student. My name is. Well, that is not important right now. What matters is that Naruko is safe. Tilting her head thoughtfully, as if weighing the suggestion, the girl said, well, usually I'm only in my weapon form, so I went by Soul Eater most of the time. But my last wielder had a form that I felt would suit a female body better, so I'll take her name. Naruko took a moment to observe her carefully. She had spiky silver hair that fell just below her neck in the back and framed her face in the front, partially covering her bright green eyes. In the moonlight, she appeared almost ethereal, but in the daylight, Naruko could see that her skin had a warm tan, giving her a quiet, mysterious presence. She wore an open white vest over a black top, which revealed a bit of her midsection, and light blue jeans with two sizable pockets at the front. Her footwear consisted of white and silver running shoes, practical and unassuming. Naruko returned her gaze to the girl's face as they all waited patiently. After a few moments of thought, the girl snapped her fingers and said brightly, "Call me Riku." That easily resolved the question of how her previous wielder's name would suit her. Naruko paced in front of the doors leading out of the Hokage's office. She could not sit still for more than 30 minutes, something Iruka could easily confirm. And it had already been an hour and a half since that mark had passed. The third Hokage, holding his pipe thoughtfully, regarded the young woman before him, who introduced herself as Riku, with a careful and discerning gaze. And you genuinely wish me to believe you have traveled across the world, even before the shinobi villages were established, dating back to the time of the Rikadu Sennin? If it weren't for the fact that you demonstrated the ability to transform your body into an actual weapon, I would find it hard to believe. But please, tell me again how your journey came to an end, Hiruzen asked, curious about the elaborate story the young woman had presented. Sighing, Riku adjusted herself in the chair, preparing to recount the events that had brought her back to this world. That is, until Naruko approached her and spoke. Gigi, we already heard it once. She had 3 wielders, 2 who misused her abilities, and the last one made a great sacrifice to protect her friends and the world, along with someone named Sora. Then she ended up in Konoha because of some huge explosion that brought her here. Though I got lost at that part. Turning to Riku with a puzzled expression, Naruko began pacing, thinking of ways to understand the story more clearly. Riku raised a thin silver eyebrow at Naruko's straightforward summary and her manner of addressing the old Hokage, which seemed more like a city leader than a traditional village head. Destiny Islands was the final place where my previous wielder and his friend Sora faced Xehanort. Sora wielded a weapon called the X-Blade, and the original Riku wielded me, though I was called Void Gear at the time. Those two were the last to confront Xehanort, who had temporarily acquired the X-Blade and used it to harness the power of Kingdom Hearts. It took everything they had, but Sora ultimately drew strength from Kingdom Hearts itself, surpassing Xehanort's abilities. Even though Xehanort was stronger than me, by teaming up with Sora, they forced him to reveal his final strategy. This led to all 3 being incapacitated temporarily, and I was transported through the space in between. I eventually arrived in this world, weakened into my current form, Soul Eater. I was found by someone whose presence exuded darkness, but I managed to escape, marking the first time I took this form. A few months later, I had fainted and apparently reverted to my weapon form. The last memory I have before tonight is being on a piece of paper while someone in red armor pressed their hand on me. When I came to, I was in Naruko's possession. Something felt off when I transformed to defend her from incoming throwing stars, but the rest you already know. Riku concluded her story, shorter than it could have been, folding her arms and awaiting a response. Hiruzen nodded, reflecting on past events he had witnessed through his crystal ball. Though he noticed curious details about the people involved, he decided they were not relevant to the present discussion. He focused on the young woman before him. Considering that you cannot remember nearly 50 years spent in a seal, it seems time passes differently there. I am curious about your other names. Why did you go by Void Gear when facing Xehanort, but now are called Soul Eater? The old Hokage's voice remained calm, concealing the curiosity he felt about the young woman's extraordinary history. Riku hummed thoughtfully, while Naruko fought to stay awake, still waiting for her headband, which she had been promised. Her previous teachers had deemed her a failure despite her strong performance, and now she hoped the Hokage would recognize her achievements properly. Breaking the silence, Riku spoke, her sharp voice commanding attention. I am a weapon with 3 forms. Void Gear was my first and strongest form, likely my true form. Soul Eater is my second, less powerful form. My third form exists somewhere between the two, though I cannot recall its name or the events prior to my reversion. The only things that remain clear are the previous wielder's name and the battle I described, followed by my arrival here. She relaxed, laying her arms on the chair's armrests. Naruko yawned, finally asking the question she had been holding back. Gigi, can I have my headband now? It's late, and I don't want to miss breakfast at Ichiraku. Hiruzen chuckled and produced an older headband from his sleeve. Though it was longer than usual and marked with minor scratches, the metal plate bearing the hidden leaf symbol remained intact. This, my child, is my old headband. It has seen much use, and though there are newer ones, I believe it is time to pass it on to see how the next generation of shinobi fares, Hiruzen said, offering it to Naruko, who stared in awe at the gesture. Riku interjected immediately. No. I will not allow my wielder to be confined or restricted. The intensity in Riku's emerald eyes left Iruka momentarily speechless, though Hiruzen simply observed the situation calmly. What? I wouldn't be confined if I became a ninja. I'd get to explore all sorts of places. When you are ready, Riku interrupted, her gaze unwavering. I refuse to have you restricted here when there are far greater places for you to experience. Naruko's mouth opened in surprise, while Riku's determined expression radiated a fire that made Iruka instinctively look away. They would be controlled environments, likely to attract curious observers, as Naruko could attest from how often she had quietly observed some of the ninja during their training sessions. Naruko's hands were a second too late to prevent her interruption, and the reaction was immediate. Iruka looked surprised at Naruko, though a nearby fly was quickly shooed away before it could get close. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow. Naruko, how have you been observing others in Konoha? That is not respectful, and I expect an explanation. Absolutely not, Naruko exclaimed, cutting off her grandfather figure. Do you know how unfairly the academy instructors treated me? Even worse than what Iruka-sensei sometimes says. Hiruzen's other eyebrow joined the first on his forehead at that remark. The taijutsu teacher repeatedly gave me very difficult challenges. I had to make do with poor quality equipment for training, and the tests I received were far above my level. Naruko removed her hands from Riku's mouth after a brief moment of distraction, wiping them clean before settling back into her chair, clearly frustrated at having to recount her difficulties. And you never came to me, or Iruka-kun, about this? Why? Hiruzen asked gently. Naruko glanced away, focusing on the wall as if it held all the answers. I thought. You didn't need to worry about me. Her quiet, mumbled voice would have been difficult for anyone else to hear, but Iruka, Riku, and the Hokage understood perfectly, despite her soft tone. Naruko-kun, if you had come to me earlier, you would have received proper guidance, not the challenges you faced, Hiruzen said firmly, emphasizing the word guidance, hinting to Iruka that new instructors might soon join the Konoha Ninja Academy. Naruko shook her head, resigned. No, it wouldn't have mattered. Iruka-sensei was the only one who treated me fairly. Even if the other teachers changed, it would have been the same. Her eyes dulled as she recalled being overlooked in classes, struggling with inferior equipment, and having to find her own ways to improve. The next words Naruko heard sparked surprise and excitement. Then I shall guide you beyond swordsmanship. Confusion quickly replaced her shock. After all, Riku continued, my wielder should never be underestimated, if I can help it. Iruka gave Riku a curious look. How could you teach her? You don't know much about Konoha's history or the nation's teachings. So I'll focus on math and etiquette. Geography can be learned through travel, Riku explained. Naruko tilted her head in curiosity. But you're a sword. How can you teach her anything? Iruka asked. I had a connection with my previous wielder that allowed me to share knowledge about how to wield me. It worked both ways, so I gained insights as they learned new techniques, Riku explained. She lifted a hand, covering it in a shimmering white energy. This is one of the skills I can teach, along with other abilities developed by my previous wielder. The energy disappeared without leaving a trace. Naruko was awestruck. Wow, that's amazing. And I can learn that from you? Along with other skills? Riku returned her hand to her lap as Naruko adjusted in her chair. You are not just learning swordsmanship. We've discussed this already, Riku said, a hint of sternness in her voice. Hiruzen rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Riku-san, may I suggest a compromise? The old Hokage asked. Naruko could wield you and still be a ninja of Konohagakure. She would travel to various regions on missions, learning and growing without being restricted. She would remain under supervision until a team spot opened, allowing her to experience the wider world. Would that be agreeable, Riku-san? Riku considered for a few moments, closing her eyes, while Iruka tried to ask why the Hokage was negotiating with a sword. All right, that works, Riku agreed. But I have two conditions. 1. Naruko should have a better home. 2. We reserve the right to decline missions that seem unhelpful or trivial. Hiruzen nodded thoughtfully. Do you have any preferences for a new home, Naruko-kun? You'll be living with Riku-san, so it's important you have a say. Naruko blinked. Why are you asking me now? Last time, you just gave me directions and said, have fun. Riku and Iruka exchanged looks at Hiruzen, who started to sweat lightly at the recollection. Naruko continued, but it's fine. I don't really care where I go, as long as it isn't a poor area anymore. Naruko yawned again as she walked down the quiet streets of Konoha. It was mid-spring, so she wasn't particularly concerned about trouble from anyone. Having a Chunin walking beside her certainly helped, along with the girl who could transform into a sword, or was it a sword that could transform into a girl? It doesn't really matter. She has 2 forms, that's all, Naruko thought, twisting her body to avoid bumping into a nearby pole. Her mind wandered to grand ambitions, becoming the greatest ninja, resolving conflicts, and perhaps one day establishing a community of her own. Dreams like that might seem far-fetched, but it never hurt to aim high. Naruko, are you sure you should be here? This isn't just the poorer district, it's the lowest of the low. You really don't belong here, Iruka remarked, snapping her back to reality just in time to avoid a collision with a pole. Riku sighed as Naruko rubbed her nose, mirroring the gesture herself. If you're going to be my wielder, you need to focus. I can't have you walking into poles every few minutes. 5, actually. The last one was before we got here, Naruko said, pouting in a way that was more playful than serious. Iruka's amused smile made her turn back to their path with a resigned huff. Come on, it's only a few minutes from here, Naruko said as they continued walking. Meanwhile, Riku discreetly scanned the rooftop of a nearby building, unnoticed by the 2 men, before releasing a small burst of white energy. The sudden noise drew attention immediately. What just happened? Naruko asked, her curiosity piqued. Watch your language, Iruka scolded lightly, smacking the back of her head as a playful reminder. Naruko rubbed the spot and turned to Riku. What did you do? Crossing her arms, Riku's expression remained calm but determined. That person was radiating intense negative energy. I couldn't risk letting either you or your teacher face that without intervention. Sometimes preemptive action is necessary. Naruko blinked at the blackened figure, having sensed the troubling energy but never thought much of it. Iruka frowned. What do you mean by negative energy? I would have sensed it if it were that strong. Riku's gaze turned to Iruka. Let's focus on getting Naruko to her old place first. It's better to talk privately. Naruko nodded, and the group resumed walking. Later, sitting on her old couch for what might be the last time, Naruko sighed. The furniture was old and uncomfortable, but memories lingered. Riku, what exactly did you mean about negative energy? She asked. Negative energy is an aura someone gives off when their intentions are harmful or overwhelming. It doesn't always lead to action, but it can influence others around them, Riku explained patiently. And darkness, it's not inherently bad. It's neutral, but those who harness it can sometimes cause chaos if they aren't careful. Others, however, can use it responsibly for good. My previous wielder was an unfortunate exception, but lessons were learned. Naruko and Iruka listened closely as Riku continued. Every person's heart, their true spirit, contains both light and darkness. Most people are naturally balanced, but those who wield darkness must learn control. If not managed, darkness can dominate, making them act impulsively. For someone like you, Naruko, mastering this will make you stronger without losing yourself. Naruko raised a hand. What about light? Can we use that too? Absolutely, Riku said with a nod. But since your strength is tied to darkness, focusing on mastering that is the priority. Light will always be part of your balance, even if it's less visible right now. Iruka glanced at the window as sunlight streamed in. Looks like the morning passed quickly while we were talking. Naruko yawned again, stretched, and noticed the sword in the corner of her room. So, today's moving day. No more tiny inconveniences and old furniture. Her enthusiasm caused Riku to appear beside her, blinking sleepily. Why the excitement so late in the morning? The sun's high. We need to move quickly, Riku. Naruko grabbed the sword's hand and pulled her along, racing out of the apartment. Using rooftops to avoid curious onlookers, Riku shifted into her sword form to travel faster. Naruko's laughter echoed as she listened to Riku's playful banter in her mind. You like this better than being human? Just teasing, Naruko. No need to answer, Riku replied. Landing safely near the Hokage Tower, Naruko greeted the Anbu guards warmly, waving as they nodded in return. She remembered the early pranks she had played and how her reputation preceded her. Even with my mischievous side, some people here are surprisingly kind, she thought. Inside, the red-haired woman seated gracefully at the desk gave Naruko a warm welcome. "Naruko, you're officially my new tenant." Naruko blinked in surprise. "You're serious?" "Yes," the woman replied, smiling. "And we've arranged a special arrangement for you as a shinobi." Naruko looked around, taking in the new penthouse and realizing this was the start of an exciting new chapter of her life. "Noble," was the word that came to mind as Kirho-san spoke, now calm instead of frustrated. "I offer all my shinobi residents discounts for living in my apartment complexes, although they must follow stricter rules than civilian tenants. The discount also varies by rank. For example, since you are my first Shinon resident in several years, Uzumaki-san, you will receive a higher discount than the other shinobi. However, since you will also be in the penthouse, your cost will be equivalent to that of a chunin in a standard apartment." Riku looked intrigued, curious about the reasoning, and Naruko asked her own question. Sarutobi responded patiently. Kirho-san's apartment complex operates under a unique system. Her penthouse is only twice the cost of a standard apartment, instead of the usual multiple times higher. Her clan has been one of the primary suppliers of tools, equipment, and resources for Kanahagakure for as long as anyone can remember. They are also among the finest craftsmen in the village. Sarutobi and Riku tuned out Kirho-san's quiet mumbles about being the best if they could purchase a particular business. As a result, there are very few things the current head of the Kirho group cannot do. And, every now and then, she also takes on the role of landlady herself. Naruko's wide-eyed expression at Sarutobi made the elderly man chuckle. Once the contracts and documents were reviewed and signed, Naruko shook hands with Kirho Mitsuru and watched the poised woman leave. Sarutobi thought he might have seen her graceful movement, though Naruko hadn't noticed, and Riku had dozed off. After finishing the paperwork, Naruko's grin turned toward Sarutobi. "This is one of the best days I've ever had. Thank you so much, Gigi." The old man waved off her thanks with a modest smile. He felt he hardly deserved it. Once Naruko woke Riku and explained their next activity for the day, she grabbed her weapon and leapt out the window, nearly prompting Sarutobi to shout at an imaginary figure. At the secluded training ground, Riku appeared once more and took her place opposite Naruko. "All right, since we're training, I'll go easy on you at first," Riku began, her hand engulfed in a brilliant white flame, "but today's focus is on dodging. From our earlier practice, I noticed you tend to block more than dodge, and that could put you at a disadvantage. We'll work on your speed and reaction time. Any questions before we begin?" Naruko nodded, swallowing nervously. "This technique is called Dark Fire," Riku continued. "Right now, I can only launch one at a time, since I haven't practiced it in decades, but it will help both of us. Now, I suggest you move quickly." With that, their training commenced. Naruko leaned against a tree, panting, staring at her sword with a mix of amazement and frustration. "What just happened? The entire area went dark, and I couldn't control myself. Now so many trees are altered." Gripping her bat-winged sword, Naruko listened intently as Riku explained. "Okay, too much energy channeled at once. But you said a little would make me move faster, not send me flying around." Naruko's eyes widened as she absorbed Riku's words. Riku appeared beside her, catching her breath from the exertion. "No, I'm not exaggerating. If you hadn't released the energy into the ground and into the lightning, we could still be going at this. The marks we left are proof, they were far stronger than anything I've used before." She shook her head to calm herself. If we had used a practice target, it would have been completely transformed by now. Naruko hoped Riku was overstating, while Riku silently wished Naruko would understand the seriousness of the exercise. Naruko whistled a little tune as she made her way to her favorite spot in Konoha, aside from the Hokage Tower or Monument, Ishiraku Noodle Shop. Riku walked beside her, deep in thought. She hadn't noticed until now that Naruko's heart radiated an extraordinary amount of light, balanced only by a tiny trace of darkness that gave her a distinct personality. Curiously, there was a small red dot within that darkness. Riku had sensed another presence when she had held Naruko's hand before, but hadn't given it much thought until now. Perhaps it was time to explain how to perceive the darkness, and what little of it Naruko carried. Once they were out of public view, Riku suggested they eat in silence to avoid any unwanted attention. Riku ate carefully, while Naruko slurped her noodles with enthusiasm. Fortunately, Naruko managed not to spill any, sparing Riku the trouble of switching to Soul Eater mode to clean up. On their way to their new home, Naruko rubbed her stomach, content with the meal. Suddenly, a gentle tap on her shoulder made her turn. A familiar face from the Ninja Academy stood there. Tenten-chan? What brings you here? Naruko observed Tenten's new outfit, which seemed to complement her growing figure. While she wasn't fully matured yet, Naruko's curious mind noticed the changes. Walked on a roof? Tenten's words prompted Naruko to nod in understanding, taking a moment to recall the conversation that had led up to the question. Wondering what might need to remain private, Naruko glanced at Riku first. Wait here. I'll only be a few minutes. After Tenten nodded, Naruko leapt to the nearest rooftop, Tenten following shortly after. So, what did you want to discuss? Naruko asked, noticing Tenten's expression shift from forced calm to concern. Tenten hesitated, then spoke quickly, almost too fast for words on a page. Do you know why Mizuki acted strangely last night? Naruko, accustomed to fast talk, caught the meaning immediately and responded with calm curiosity. Nope. Not really concerned. It seems Mizuki was just upset about something. But how do you know about it? I'm pretty sure Hokage Gigi hasn't told anyone, and I only know what Iruka-sensei and I experienced. Crossing her arms, Naruko gave Tenten a serious look, causing Tenten to fidget a little. I sometimes stay out late for training, and I found a small shack for practice. One night, I was there when something happened near the wall, which woke me. That's when I saw everything, Tenten explained carefully, pausing to ensure no one could overhear. So you saw Riku's skill in action? Naruko asked. Tenten winced slightly at the memory but nodded. Right, then you helped guide me to Hokage Gigi, Naruko said, turning to Riku. Let's meet back at the tower. Naruko then faced Tenten again, noticing the worry on her face. She looked a bit like someone who had witnessed something shocking, and Naruko felt a twinge of sympathy. Don't worry. I trust you, Tenten-chan. Hokage Gigi would just want to keep it quiet so people aren't concerned. After Tenten nodded, relieved, the two leapt toward the Hokage tower, passing Riku, who followed at a calmer pace. This gave Riku time to consider how to explain to Naruko the delicate balance of light and darkness in a safe, positive way. First, there's very little darkness in Naruko, just enough for her abilities without causing harm, Riku mused. That red dot might be the reason it doesn't overwhelm her. As long as she's careful, she'll be fine. Riku examined her own hands, confirming they were unharmed. I'll need to teach Naruko how to use this responsibly, how to be a balanced light and darkness user, she thought with a small smile. She's not the kind to rush into anything, but she's capable of great kindness and courage. When it comes to friendships or bonds, she'll navigate them in her own thoughtful way, Riku chuckled quietly, imagining Naruko's future adventures and the people she might inspire. Naruko sighed as she skillfully moved through another group of misguided ronin. The little squad sent against her seemed endless, even though it had only been supposed to be around 400. Perhaps taking this mission hadn't been the wisest choice. Raising a hand, she focused her energy, enveloping the area in a protective domain. In minutes, only a few remained outside her reach. Twirling a kunai in her fingers, Naruko wondered why everything felt so overwhelming. It should have been a simple mission: get in, accomplish the task, and return home. But it wasn't. This was one of those recorded for emergencies only assignments, a situation so tricky it wouldn't appear in any standard handbook, even for Hokage-sama. Slashing her kunai with precision, she noticed how her powers felt weaker without her partner nearby, a logical consequence since her partner was her conduit. Other weapons faltered under her control, just as the 10 or so kunai she had already used had. A thought then struck her: why am I so calm about this? Later, Naruko walked up to the Konoha Ninja Academy, contemplating the teasing she might endure for showing up despite her earlier failure. Her familiar sword rested on her back, carefully sheathed so it wouldn't draw unnecessary attention, unlike the previous week when a curious civilian had glimpsed her while she practiced on the rooftops. She smiled to herself, reflecting on that memory rather than fretting about joining a pre-existing team assigned by the Hokage. I hope we're not paired with Sasuke and Sakura. And definitely not Kaka-sensei. I'd rather not deal with the usual chaos, she muttered quietly. Naruko had no personal grudge against anyone, it was just a matter of preference. Her encounters with others were fleeting yet memorable, such as when Riku had humorously remarked about certain team members needing a little guidance. Naruko had laughed long and hard at that, appreciating the levity amidst the stress. Sliding open the door to her soon-to-be former classroom, Naruko waved at Iruka-sensei, her smile widening when it was returned. She made her way to her old seat, noting that she had arrived early. Only Nara Shikamaru, Akimichi Choji, and Aburame Shino were present. Leaning back with her feet propped comfortably on her desk, Naruko decided to rest a while, much like Inara, until the classroom filled. Shino, seated near the window, was quietly curious why Naruko had joined the graduating students, given that she had previously failed. Yet, seeing that Naruko had no intention of engaging, Shino chose not to disturb her. Choji, munching on a morning muffin, was less alert than most of his family clan, and Shikamaru, as usual, was far too comfortable to bother with curiosity. As students trickled in, many glanced at Naruko with questioning eyes. A few stifled smiles when they noticed her peacefully napping. The familiar classroom chaos unfolded as Sakura and Ino arrived simultaneously, jostling to reach their preferred seats. Naruko, still resting, remained unbothered, allowing the girls to navigate around her with growing frustration. Eventually, Naruko awoke to the commotion, stretching and blinking at the scene. 2 cream pies, remnants of a playful prank, rested on the floor in front of her. She chuckled softly, realizing why she had been woken. Picking up the clean pans, she smirked, recalling Riku's snickering in her mind. Iruka-sensei quickly restored order, directing the students to their seats. As he called out team assignments, Naruko listened with interest. Team 10 would be Akimichi Choji, Nara Shikamaru, and Yamanaka Ino. Some students questioned her presence, noting she had not originally passed. Iruka explained that Naruko had been given a second chance and would join an existing team as a reserve member, allowing her to gain experience without waiting for an unexpected event. After class, Naruko strolled to her favorite ramen stand, whistling a light tune. Riku's voice echoed in her mind, playfully accompanying the melody. "Hi, Ayame-chan. How's it going?" Naruko greeted cheerfully. "I'm doing well, Naruko-kun. Wait. You graduated? Why didn't you come by yesterday?" Ayame exclaimed, noticing the newly earned accomplishment. Naruko laughed, scratching the back of her head. "Well, I had a little retesting to do, but I passed this time." She explained the story with a playful smile, making sure Ayame didn't see the nervousness behind it. Ayame's curiosity then turned to Naruko's sword. "What's with the hilt on your back?" Naruko waved her hand, weaving a tale about it being a secondary focus of energy, necessary for her mission. Riku's presence in her mind added playful commentary, though Naruko simply shrugged and continued. "But I passed, so everything's fine." "Oh, does this mean I get a free bowl of ramen?" Naruko asked with excitement. Ayame laughed and shook her head, offering a half-off bowl instead, which still made Naruko beam with delight. Naruko moved swiftly through the crowd, barely glancing at those who hurried past her. Despite the chaos, her focus remained on a single goal: retrieving her companion and ensuring her safety. She knew she had to navigate the bustling hallways carefully, as the place she had entered, apparently a training facility, was crowded with activity and obstacles. When did I become so focused on just moving forward while everything else is in disarray? She wondered. Later, Naruko returned to the academy, her stomach full from a satisfying bowl of ramen. She wondered briefly whether Guy-sensei would allow her to join his team for the Chunin exams if one of the original members became unavailable, but she quickly dismissed the thought. It was not important for now. Plopping into a seat beside a familiar, serious-looking classmate, Naruko leaned back and idly examined her eyelids. Until a tap on her shoulder snapped her attention forward. "You better not be dozing off, Uzumaki," a calm voice said. Naruko turned to see Hyuga Neji standing with arms crossed. "Neji, why were you sent to get me? Couldn't it have been Lee or Tenten-chan?" she asked, adjusting her usual cheerful demeanor to meet his composed presence. While others in the room wondered why Neji seemed to affect Naruko's energy, she quietly hoped to remain unnoticed as she shifted slightly in her seat. Lee would probably turn it into a sprint through the village, and Tenten was late again. "So it fell to me to bring you to Guy-sensei," Neji explained, gesturing toward the door. "All right, then. Let's get this over with," Naruko said with a small smile. "The sooner we arrive, the better." Neji allowed a faint smile to cross his face, and together they left the classroom, Naruko trailing 2 steps behind, leaving a mixture of curiosity and relief in the air. Meanwhile, Lee calmed down quickly upon seeing Naruko, giving her a cheerful hug. Naruko playfully tapped a spot on his back, eliciting a surprised but happy reaction. The pair then began sharing stories about the past year, catching up on their training adventures and accomplishments. "I got this new jumpsuit, and Guy-sensei has officially taken me under his guidance," Lee said, bowing multiple times. "I also want to thank you again, Naruko, for helping me improve my taijutsu at the academy. I couldn't have persuaded the teachers to let me retake the exam without your support." Naruko waved dismissively, chuckling. "You had the determination all along, Lee." I just cheered you on. Guy-sensei, ever enthusiastic, struck what he called the nice guy pose. Naruko, you've inspired Lee's confidence for days to come. I invite you to join us for a morning training session. Naruko shook her head politely. Thank you, Guy-sensei, but I have my own morning routine. I might join you and Lee for evening training sometime, though. As Lee and Guy-sensei exclaimed their trademark cheer together, Naruko couldn't help but giggle at the cacophony, eventually collapsing onto her back from laughter. Lee knelt to help her up, while Tenten shook her head with amusement at the lively scene. For once, it wasn't her or Neji caught in the chaos, and even Neji looked quietly entertained. Lee chuckled nervously as Naruko shook her head to clear the dizziness, then noticed something unusual. Naruko, what is that sword on your back? It looks much larger than anything else I've seen, and Tenten-san has so many impressive weapons. Tenten blushed lightly at the implied compliment, while Naruko glanced to her right toward Lee. Oh, this? I received it when I graduated. Hokage Jiji wanted to give me a special gift, so I got this from him. Naruko's little fib slipped out as smoothly as noodles in soup. No one would notice her subtle tell, and Guy was looking the other way, energetically practicing with a training log. Lee blinked, then nodded. I see. That was very thoughtful of Hokage-sama. But Naruko, may I ask when you became interested in swordsmanship? Naruko rubbed her nose thoughtfully and explained honestly, since she had always admired anyone who could handle weapons skillfully. Well, except nunchaku and tonfa users, I never really understood how those could be helpful in a fight. Those words were probably the least tactful Naruko could have chosen. Guy and Tenten immediately demonstrated why those types of weapons could indeed be very effective. Dear YouTube family, this is all for now. If you enjoyed the content, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel to stay updated. Your support truly makes a difference. Thank you for being part of this journey. Warm regards. 6 Path Weeb.